The war had ended 3 months ago, but the smoke still rose from distant cities on the alien world below. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the human warship, Victory. His hands gripped the cold metal railing as he watched the planet spin slowly in the darkness of space. His uniform was torn and dirty from the final battle that had decided the fate of 2 galaxies. The sleeve of his jacket showed burn marks from enemy plasma fire, and his boots still carried dust from the last battlefield. Jake was 32 years old, but felt much older after 5 years of brutal fighting. The Elvari Empire had fallen after 200 years of conflict. Their beautiful crystal cities lay broken and empty. Their proud space fleets now drifted as twisted metal debris in the void between stars. The war that had started when Jake was just a young soldier was finally over, but winning a war brought its own problems. Admiral Lisa Kane walked up beside him on the observation deck. She held a datapad in her weathered hands. Her face was grim as always, but today something else showed in her dark eyes. Jake had served under Kane for 3 years and knew her moods well. "The council has made their decision," she said quietly. Her voice carried the weight of command, but also something that might have been regret. "You get first choice from the prisoner. Registry." Jake looked down at the datapad she offered him. The screen showed a list of names and faces. All were Elvari prisoners, captured during the final assault on their capital world. Most were nobles and military officers, but some were scientists, artists, or simple merchants. All would become servants to human families as payment for the damage their empire had caused. It was an old custom from ancient Earth wars. The victors took prizes from the defeated. Jake did not like the practice, but orders were orders. He scrolled through dozens of faces. Most of the Elvari looked broken and defeated. Their pointed ears drooped, and their eyes stared at nothing. The fire had gone out of them when their world fell. Then one face made him stop. She had silver hair that seemed to glow even in the harsh lighting of the prison transport. Her ears were pointed like all Elvari, but longer and more elegant. Something about her seemed different from the others. Her bright green eyes held a fire that the rest had lost. She stared directly at the camera instead of looking away. "Name is Luna Starweaver," Admiral Kane said, reading from the file on her own pad. "Former Dragon Keeper for the Royal House, 26 years old by human counting. She controlled 3 battle dragons during the siege of Nexus Prime Dragons." Jake had heard many stories about the great beasts that the Elvari used in their wars, creatures made of pure energy and starlight that could tear through the hulls of warships like they were made of paper. Most had been destroyed in the final battle when the Elvari capital fell. These 3 survived, Kane continued. They bonded to her specifically. "The council thinks having a dragon keeper might be useful for studying Elvari technology and magic." Jake studied the image more carefully. Luna Starweaver wore the simple gray prison clothes that all captured Elvari received, but even in those plain garments she carried herself with dignity. Her chin was raised and her back was straight. She looked like royalty, even in defeat. The file said she came from one of the oldest Elvari families her ancestors had kept dragons for over 1,000 years. The skill was passed down from mother to daughter in an unbroken line that stretched back to the founding of their empire. During the war, Luna had been responsible for 3 of the most dangerous battle dragons in the Elvari fleet. The creatures had destroyed dozens of human ships before the final battle. The military wanted to study them to understand how Elvari magic worked, but Jake was not thinking about military value. As he looked at her picture, there was something in her eyes that called to him. She had not given up even though her world had fallen. Her people were broken, but she still fought in her own way. "I will take her," he said. Kane nodded and made a note on her datapad. "The transport will arrive at your ranch in 2 days," she said. "Make sure you understand what you are getting, Morrison. These are not ordinary prisoners. Dragons are dangerous even in captivity." Jake had bought a ranch on the colony world of New Texas after the war ended. The planet was still being terraformed, but it had wide open spaces under clean blue skies. It was far from the crowded cities of Earth and the memories of battle. He wanted peace and quiet to heal from the war. But now he would have company. The shuttle, Arrived exactly 2 days later, Jake stood on his front porch watching it land in the field behind his house. The craft was military gray and bore the symbols of the prisoner transport service. Luna stepped off first wearing the same gray dress that marked her as a war prize. Her hands were locked in energy restraints that glowed with blue light. 2 armed guards walked beside her, ready to stun her if she tried to escape. Behind them came the dragons. Jake had never seen the creatures up close. Before, they were smaller than he expected, about the size of large horses, but they moved with liquid grace that took his breath away. Their scales shifted color from deep blue to silver to gold as they walked. The sunlight seemed to dance across their bodies. The lead dragon was female, with scales the color of midnight. Her eyes glowed with inner fire as she looked around the ranch. She moved her head like a snake tasting the air. Her name, according to the file, was Zara. The second dragon was larger, with golden scales that blazed in the afternoon sun. His name was Blaze, and he was clearly the leader of the group. He watched Jake with obvious intelligence behind his glowing eyes. The third dragon was smaller, with green scales that reminded Jake of deep forest shadows. Storm was his name, and he stayed close to Luna like a protective guardian. All 3 dragons were beautiful and terrible. At the same time, they wore containment collars around their necks that would shock them if they tried to use their fire breath or energy attacks, but even restrained, they radiated power. "Careful," Captain warned one of the guards as Jake approached. "They are still dangerous even with the restraints. Active yesterday, one of them nearly broke free." During feeding time, Luna spoke for the first time since arriving. Her voice was musical but cold, like wind chimes made of ice. "Zara does not like being caged," she said in perfect English with only a slight accent. "She has not eaten since we were captured." "None of them have." Jake studied the elf woman closely. She stood straight despite the restraints, and her chin was raised in the same defiance he had seen in her picture. Even as a prisoner on an alien world, she carried herself like the royalty she had once been. Her silver hair fell to her waist and seemed to move with a life of its own. Her green eyes were brighter than emeralds and held depths that spoke of great age despite her young appearance. The guard spent an hour setting up the containment fields around his property. The energy barriers would keep Luna and her dragons from leaving the ranch, but allow them to move freely within its borders. When the shuttle left, Jake found himself alone with his new prisoners for the first time. Luna knelt beside her dragons, speaking to them in the flowing musical language of her people. The creatures responded to her touch, their scales brightening slightly for the first time since their arrival. Jake watched from his porch as the sun set behind the mountains. The war was over, but somehow he felt like his real adventure was just beginning. The first night was difficult. Jake could hear Luna singing through his bedroom window. Her voice carried across the ranch yard in the ancient language of her people. The song was sad and beautiful, like nothing he had ever heard before. He looked out to see her sitting beside the stable where her dragons rested. The containment field glowed softly around them, casting blue light on her silver hair. The dragons had their heads raised, listening to her song. Jake did not sleep well. His dreams were filled with memories of the war, mixed with new images of green eyes and silver hair. When morning came, he felt tired and confused. Luna was already awake when he stepped outside. She knelt beside the dragons, trying to tend to them with her bare hands. The containment fields prevented her from getting too close to their injuries. "They need sunlight," she said without looking at him. "On my world, they would hunt in the crystal forests and bathe in the light of twin suns. Here they grow weak without proper care." Jake had been prepared for anger or tears from his prisoner, but this quiet determination to care for her companions surprised him. She seemed more concerned about the dragons than her own situation. The creatures looked sick in the morning. Light. Their scales were dull, and their eyes had lost some of their fire. Zara, the blue female, lay on her side, breathing slowly. Blaze paced back and forth like a caged animal. Storm just stared at nothing. Jake walked to the control panel for the containment system. His finger hovered over the controls. The guards had warned him never to lower the fields without backup, but looking at the suffering dragons, he made a choice. The energy barriers flickered and died. The dragons immediately moved. To Luna, nuzzling against her with obvious affection. She ran her hands along their scales, checking for injuries and speaking words of comfort in her musical language. "Why did you do that?" Luna asked. Her green eyes met his for the first time. "Because they are not the enemy anymore," Jake replied. "And neither are you." Something shifted in her expression. The hard mask of defiance cracked slightly, showing the pain underneath. She had lost everything in the war: her world, her family, her freedom. But she still cared for these creatures that depended on her. Over the following days, a strange routine developed. Luna spent her time caring for the dragons while Jake watched from a distance. She never spoke to him unless necessary, but he noticed small things she sang to them at dawn and dusk. Her voice carried across the ranch like music from another world. She knew exactly what each dragon needed when they were hurting. She cried when she thought no one was looking. The dragons began to eat again. Though they remained wary of Jake, they would hiss and spark whenever he approached, but they no longer tried to attack. The healing process was slow but steady. Zara was the most suspicious. She would bare her teeth whenever Jake came near, and her scales would shift to angry. Red Storm was shy and stayed close to Luna at all times. But Blaze the golden male began to show curiosity about their human captor. On the 5th day, Jake found Luna by the lake behind his house. She sat on a fallen log, watching her dragons play in the shallow water. Their scales reflected the afternoon sunlight like living jewels. "This is not what I expected," she said as Jake approached slowly. "What did you expect?" he asked. "To be treated like property," she replied without turning around. "To be beaten or worse. Humans have a reputation for cruelty among my people. Some humans, maybe." Jake sat down on another log a few feet away, keeping his distance. "But not all of us are the same. We did not start this war." Luna turned to look at him. Her silver eyes were like mirrors reflecting his own face back at him. "No," she said quietly. "My people started it. The council believed humans were beneath us, a young race that could be easily conquered and enslaved. They were wrong about many things." The largest dragon, Blaze, lifted his golden head from the water. He studied Jake for a long moment with eyes like liquid fire. Then slowly, carefully, he approached. "His name is Blaze," Luna said. "He wants to know why you freed us from the containment fields." "I do not know," Jake admitted honestly. "Maybe because keeping thinking beings in cages feels wrong regardless of what species they are." Blaze extended his long neck, allowing Jake to touch his scales for the first time. They were warm and smooth, like polished metal. The dragon rumbled deep in his chest, a sound that might have been approval. That evening, Luna spoke more freely than she had since arriving. She told Jake about her life before the war, growing up in the dragon sanctuaries of her homeworld, learning the ancient arts of bonding and communication from her grandmother. The dragons were not pets, she explained. They were partners and friends. Each one chose their own keeper, and the bond lasted for life. When a dragon died, its keeper often followed from grief. When a keeper died, the dragon would never bond again. "My grandmother kept 12 dragons," Luna said with a sad smile. "She was the greatest keeper in 1,000 years. When she died, they all flew into the sun rather than live without her." Jake found himself fascinated by her stories. The Elvari had seemed like cold, emotionless enemies during the war. But Luna spoke of love and loss, joy and sorrow, just like any human would. She asked questions about human culture, too. Why did humans fight so hard in the war? How did they build ships that could travel between stars? What was Earth like before humans spread to other worlds? Jake tried to answer as best he could. He told her about human determination and the drive to explore new places. He described the blue oceans and green forests of Earth that he remembered from his childhood. As the weeks passed, the dragons began to accept Jake as well. Zara, the blue female, would allow him to feed her. Though she still watched him with suspicious eyes, Storm began to follow him around the ranch like a curious pet. But it was Blaze who formed the strongest connection. The golden dragon would accompany Jake on his daily walks around the property. They developed a simple form of communication through gestures and body language. Luna watched these interactions with growing interest. She began to teach Jake simple words in the dragon language, sounds that meant friend or food or danger. The dragons responded when he used their names correctly. One morning, Jake woke to find Luna and her dragons gone. Panic filled his chest as he searched the ranch, calling their names. Had they escaped during the night? Would he be blamed for their disappearance? He found them at the highest point on his property, a hill that overlooked the valley. Luna stood with her arms spread wide while the dragons flew circles around her. They moved through the air like dancers, their scales catching the morning light. Jake watched, in amazement, as they performed an ancient ritual Luna had told him about, the flight of greeting, where dragons welcomed each new day with celebration. She stood in the center, directing their movements with small gestures. When they landed, Luna turned to see Jake watching from below. For the first time since her arrival, she smiled. The expression transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. "They remember who they are," she called down to him. "The dragons remember joy." That smile changed something between them. From that moment, their conversations became easier, more open. Luna began to share stories of her childhood, while Jake told her about his dreams for the ranch. The dragons sensed the growing friendship between their keeper and the human. Their behavior changed too. They no longer saw Jake as a threat but as part of their small family. But peace on New Texas could not last forever. The communication came on a cold morning 2 months after Luna arrived. Admiral Kane appeared on Jake's view screen, her face grim with bad news. "Captain, we have a situation," she said without greeting. "A group of Elvari rebels has been attacking human colonies in the Outer Rim systems. They are using dragons in their attacks." Jake felt his blood turn to ice. "How many attacks?" he asked. 12 so far," Kane replied. "They seem to be targeting supply convoys and research stations. The Council wants to know if your Dragon Keeper has any useful information about rebel strongholds or tactics." Jake glanced toward the stable where Luna was working with her dragons. He had grown to trust her over the past weeks, but this news brought back all his old suspicions about the enemy. The war might be over, but it seemed like the fighting was not. Jake walked slowly toward the stable, his mind racing with questions. The news about rebel attacks changed everything. Luna had seemed trustworthy, but could he really know what was in her heart? She was still Elvari, still connected to the people, who were now killing humans. He found her brushing Storm's green scales with a soft cloth. The young dragon purred like a giant cat, enjoying the attention. Luna looked up when Jake approached and immediately sensed something was wrong. "What has happened?" she asked. Setting down the brush, Jake told her about the attacks and watched her face carefully. Her green eyes went wide with shock and her skin turned pale. Storm sensed her distress and moved closer, pressing his head against her shoulder. "Are the last of the Royal Guard," she said quietly after a long silence. "Warriors who refused to surrender when the Empire fell. They served my cousin Prince Aldrich before he died in the final battle." "Do you know where they might be hiding?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Luna was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "There is a place," she said. "An old mining station hidden in the Void Nebula. We used it as a staging area during the last year of the war. But Jake, if you go there, they will kill you. Dragons can sense intent and they will know you mean to stop them." "I have to try," Jake said. "The Council will send a full battle fleet if these attacks continue. More people will die on both sides. Then, take me with you." Luna said. Jake started to protest, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish. I can speak to them in the old language, convince them that the war is truly over. My dragons, and I might be able to end this without more bloodshed." Jake stared at her in amazement. "Are you willing to help stop your own people?" "They are not my people anymore," Luna replied firmly. "My people died when the Empire fell. These rebels are just ghosts seeking revenge against the living. They will destroy themselves and take innocent humans with them." The decision was not easy. Jake sent a coded message to Admiral Kane explaining the situation and requesting permission to attempt a peaceful solution. The response came back within hours. Permission granted. The message read, but you will go alone. No backup can be provided in the nebula. The interference is too strong for communication. Good luck. Captain. Jake spent the next day preparing his personal ship for the journey. It was a small, fast vessel designed for scouting missions, perfect for slipping through the dangerous space around the void. Nebula Luna and her dragons would travel in the cargo hold, which had been modified with life support systems. The dragons seemed to understand they were going on an important mission. Their scales glowed brighter and they moved with nervous energy. The night before departure, Luna sat with Jake on his porch looking up at the stars. "I may not survive this," she said calmly. "The rebels will see me as a traitor for helping humans. They might kill me before I can speak to them." Jake felt something twist in his chest at the thought of losing her. Over the past months, she had become more than just a war prize or prisoner. She had become a friend, maybe something more. "We do not have to do this," he said. "There are other ways to handle the situation, no?" Luna shook her head firmly. "There are no other ways that do not end in more death. I have seen enough killing for one lifetime." The journey to the Void Nebula took 3 days of traveling through hyperspace. Jake piloted, while Luna stayed with her dragons in the cargo hold. The creatures became more agitated as they got closer to their destination. They can sense their own kind. Luna explained when Jake checked on them. "The rebels have at least 9 dragons according to your intelligence reports. My 3 can feel their pain and anger." The space around the old mining station was filled with debris and electromagnetic storms, perfect for hiding from human patrols. Jake had to use manual navigation to avoid the worst of the interference. As they approached the station, Luna's dragons began to pace and whine. Storm pressed against the hull as if trying to reach something outside. Zara made low warning, sounds deep in her throat. Blaze just stared ahead with glowing eyes. "There," Jake said, pointing to his scanner readings. 3 ships docked to the station, and multiple dragon signatures. Luna closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. The bond she shared with her dragons also connected her to others of their kind. What she sensed made her gasp in horror. "They are in pain," she whispered. "The dragons have been forced into unnatural bonds. The rebels are using hate and fear to control them instead of love and trust." The rebel ships detected Jake's vessel and moved to intercept them. Weapons powered up and targeting systems locked on. But Luna stepped onto the bridge, her 3 dragons flanking her. She spoke a single word in the ancient Elvari tongue. The word for peace in the old language of dragon keepers. The attacking ship stopped. Through the view screen, they could see dragons circling the rebel vessels. Their scales were dull and lifeless compared to Luna's healthy companions. The creatures moved like machines instead of living beings. A transmission came from the lead rebel ship. The face that appeared was that of an elderly Elvari male. His pointed ears were scarred and his eyes burned with fanatic hatred. "So Luna Starweaver comes to us at last," he said in accented English. "You who betrayed your own species to serve human masters." "I betrayed no one, Commander," Thane Luna replied. "I recognized that the war was lost and chose life over pointless death." The old commander laughed bitterly. "You chose slavery over honor. You and your dragons are traitors to everything our people once stood for." Luna stepped forward, her chin raised in defiance. "I am Luna, Starweaver, keeper of the royal sanctuary, heir to the Starweaver line that has served dragons for 1,000 years. I call upon the ancient laws of binding. Those laws died with our world." Thane snarled. "No," Luna said firmly. "Laws written in Dragonfire cannot be destroyed by mere politics. The bonds between keeper and dragon are sacred. They cannot be broken by war or defeat." Through the view screen, Jake could see the rebel dragons react to her words. Their dull scales flickered with brief flashes of color. Storm, Zara, and Blaze called out to them in the dragon language. "You have tortured these noble creatures," Luna continued. Her voice carried clearly over the communication channel. "You have forced them to serve hatred instead of love. They are dying inside, Commander. Can you not see that?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Thane's eyes. Several of the rebel dragons had stopped their patrol patterns. They hung motionless in space as if listening. The standoff lasted for hours. Neither side fired, but tension filled the space between them. Jake could see more rebel ships, approaching from deeper in the nebula. Soon they would be outnumbered. Luna never stopped speaking to the dragons. She used the old words, the sacred phrases that had been passed down through generations of keepers. Slowly, the tortured creatures began. To respond one by one, they broke away from their forced formation and flew toward Luna's ship. Their keepers screamed orders over the communication channels, but the dragons no longer obeyed. The largest of the rebel dragons landed on Jake's hull with a crash that shook the entire ship. Through the cargo bay window, Luna could see that its scales were almost black with sickness. She opened the airlock and stepped out onto the hull wearing only a breathing mask. The vacuum of space should have killed her instantly, but Elvari magic protected her for a few precious moments. Luna placed her hands on the sick dragon's head and spoke words of healing. The creature's scales began to glow with faint color as the unnatural bonds were broken. Other dragons followed, landing on nearby debris or floating free in space. Luna moved between them like a healer tending the wounded. Her own 3 dragons helped, calling out encouragement and hope. The rebels tried to regain control, but their artificial bonds had been shattered. The dragons would no longer fight for those who had tortured them. In the end, Commander Thane and his remaining followers had no choice but to surrender. Their ships were powerless without dragon support, and their crews were outnumbered by the creatures they had abused. Luna returned to Jake's ship exhausted but victorious. The rescued dragons followed in a great procession, their scales slowly returning to healthy colors as they prepared for the journey back to human space. Jake realized that everything had changed again. Luna was no longer just his war prize or even his friend. She had become something much more important. She had become the bridge between 2 species that had been enemies for too long. The journey back to human space was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. His small ship now carried not just Luna and her 3 dragons, but 12 rescued creatures that had been freed from the rebels. The cargo hold had to be expanded using emergency life support pods. Luna worked tirelessly to heal the damaged dragons. Many of them had been tortured for months. Their scales were dull, and their eyes held no light. Some could barely fly, while others refused to eat. The process of breaking unnatural bonds had left them weak and confused. Jake watched through the observation window as Luna moved between the creatures, speaking softly in the dragon language. Her own 3 dragons helped by sharing their strength and warmth with the newcomers. Storm seemed especially good at comforting the younger dragons. The former rebels were held in a separate compartment under guard. Commander Thane and his followers stared at nothing, their faces blank with defeat. They had lost more than a battle. They had lost their purpose, their reason for living on the second day of the journey. Luna collapsed from exhaustion. Jake found her unconscious in the cargo hold, surrounded by worried dragons. Zara nuzzled her face while Blaze stood guard over her. Still formed, Jake carried Luna to his personal quarters and laid her on his bed. She was lighter than he expected her, Elvari bones hollow like a bird's. Her silver hair spread across his pillow like spun moonlight. She slept for 18 hours while Jake piloted the ship and monitored the dragons. They seemed to understand that their healer needed rest. Several of the larger ones took turns watching over the smaller, injured creatures. When Luna finally woke, she found Jake sitting beside the bed reading from a data pad. His face was lined with worry and exhaustion. "How long was I asleep?" she asked, sitting up slowly. "Almost a full day," Jake replied. "You pushed yourself too hard out there. Those dragons needed more healing than one person could provide." Luna smiled weakly. "I am the last trained dragon healer in the galaxy," she said. "If I do not help them, who will?" Jake had been thinking about that question during the long hours of travel. The war had destroyed most of the Elvari dragon sanctuaries and killed nearly all the trained keepers. Luna might truly be the only one left with the knowledge to heal these creatures. "What will happen to them when we reach human space?" he asked. Luna looked uncertain. "The council will want to study them," she said. "Dragons represent power, and humans always want to understand power. But these creatures cannot be used as weapons again. They need time to heal and remember who they really are." Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. Then they will. Stay at my ranch, he said, all of them. There is enough space in Luna. You can teach others how to care for them properly. Luna stared at him in amazement. You would do that? Why? Because it is the right thing to do. Jake replied. And because watching you work with them has shown me something important. Dragons are not just weapons or tools. They are living beings with their own thoughts and feelings. Over the remaining days of travel, Jake and Luna planned how to care for 15 dragons on New Texas. The ranch would need to be expanded and new facilities built. Other humans would need to be trained in basic dragon care. Luna began teaching Jake more of the dragon language and the proper rituals for feeding and grooming. She showed him how to read dragon body language and understand their different moods. Each creature had its own personality and needs. The former rebel dragons slowly began to trust again. The youngest ones recovered fastest, while the older warriors took more time. Some had scars that would never fully heal, but all showed improvement under Luna's gentle care. When they finally reached New Texas, Admiral Kane was waiting with a full escort fleet. Jake had sent messages ahead explaining the situation, but seeing the dragons in person was different. The Admiral stood speechless as the magnificent creatures flew from the cargo holds. They are beautiful, Kane said quietly. I expected monsters, but they look like living art. Luna smiled at the compliment in the ancient language. Dragons are called children of light, she explained. They were created by the first Elvari mystics to be partners, not weapons. The council meeting took place 3 days later. Jake and Luna traveled to the orbital station above New Texas to face questions from human leadership. The rescued rebels were also brought for questioning, though they remained mostly silent. Admiral Kane presented the official report. 12 rebel attacks stopped with no human casualties. She announced. 15 dragons rescued and rehabilitated. 7 rebel ships captured with minimal damage. The council members were impressed but also concerned. What guarantee do we have that more rebels will not appear? Asked General Morrison, Jake's father. The outer colonies are still vulnerable to dragon attacks. That is why we need a new approach, Luna said, standing to address the council. The old ways of war and conquest have failed for both our species. We need partnership instead of domination. She outlined her plan for dragon sanctuaries on human worlds, places where the creatures could live safely while trained keepers learned to care for them properly. Former Elvari prisoners with dragon knowledge could work alongside human volunteers. In time, Luna explained, dragons and humans could work together as they were meant to. Dragons are natural explorers and protectors. They could help with planetary surveys, dangerous rescues, and deep space missions. The debate lasted for hours. Some council members wanted to use the dragons as weapons, while others feared they were too dangerous. Others questioned whether Elvari prisoners could be trusted with such responsibility. Jake spoke in support of Luna's plan. I have seen what dragons can do when they are treated with respect and kindness, he said. They are not monsters to be caged or weapons to be used. They are intelligent beings who deserve our protection. In the end, the council approved a limited trial program. 3 dragon sanctuaries would be established, on frontier worlds with Luna as the head keeper. She would train both human and Elvari volunteers in proper dragon care. The former rebels were given a choice. They could face trial for their attacks, or they could join the sanctuary program and help heal the dragons they had hurt. Most chose to help, including Commander Thane, who seemed broken by what he had done to the creatures. The return to New Texas felt like coming home. Jake and Luna worked together to expand the ranch into a proper sanctuary. The first human volunteers arrived within weeks, eager to learn about dragon care. Many were former soldiers like Jake, who had fought against dragons in the war. Now they were learning to feed and groom the same creatures they had once tried to destroy. The irony was not lost on anyone. Luna proved to be an excellent teacher. She was patient with the humans who struggled to pronounce dragon words and gentle with those who were still afraid of the great creatures. She had a gift for seeing the potential. In both species, the dragons themselves seemed to enjoy having new friends. Several of the younger ones became fascinated with human technology. while older dragons shared their knowledge of star navigation and energy manipulation. Blaze formed a special bond with a young human woman named Amy Chen, who had lost her arm in the war. The golden dragon seemed to understand her pain and would spend hours letting her practice one-handed grooming techniques. Storm attached himself to Dr. Richards, a human scientist who studied dragon biology. The green dragon would sit patiently for hours while the doctor took measurements and samples for research. Zara remained closest to Luna, but she began to tolerate other keepers as well. The blue dragon had appointed herself as the sanctuary guardian and took her duties seriously. As the months passed, Jake realized that the war had truly ended. Not just the fighting, but the hatred and fear that had driven it. Humans and Elvari worked side by side, caring for creatures that had once been symbols of destruction. Luna continued to amaze him with her wisdom and strength. She had lost everything in the war, her world, her family, her freedom. But instead of seeking revenge, she had chosen to build something new. One evening, as they watched the dragons play in the lake behind the sanctuary, Luna turned to Jake with a serious expression. "I want to stay here permanently," she said. "Not as a war prize or prisoner, but as a free person who chooses this life." Jake felt his heart race at her words. Over the past year, Luna had become the most important person in his world. The thought of losing her was unbearable. "You are already free," he said quietly. "You have been free since the day you chose to help stop the rebels." Luna smiled and took his hand in hers. "Then I choose to stay with you and build this dream together." Above them, the dragons sang their evening song, welcoming the night with voices like crystal bells. The sound carried across the valley, where human and Elvari children played together in the growing darkness. The war was over and something beautiful had taken its place. 2 years had passed since the first dragon sanctuary opened on New Texas. What started as a single ranch had grown into a network of facilities across human space. The program had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Jake stood on the observation platform of the main sanctuary, watching the morning feeding ritual below. 37 dragons now called this place home, ranging from ancient warriors to hatchlings born in captivity. Each one was healthy and happy, under the care of trained keepers. Luna moved through the group like a conductor leading an orchestra. Her silver hair caught the morning light as she directed the feeding with hand signals and spoken commands. The dragons responded to her every gesture, with perfect trust and understanding. Sight still amazed Jake even after all this time. During the war, dragons had been symbols of terror and destruction. Now children from nearby colonies came on field trips to meet them. The creatures were patient and gentle with the young visitors, showing off their flying skills and colorful scales. Amy Chen approached the platform carrying a datapad filled with the daily reports. She had become Luna's second-in-command and wore the blue robes of a certified dragon keeper. Her prosthetic arm moved with fluid grace as she worked. "Morning report," she said with a smile. "Dragon health is excellent across all facilities. Breeding program shows promising results, and we have requests from 12 more colonies to establish sanctuaries." Jake reviewed the numbers with satisfaction. The Dragon Sanctuary program had become one of humanity's greatest success stories. What had started as a way to manage dangerous war creatures had evolved into something much more important. The dragons were proving invaluable for deep space exploration. Their natural ability to navigate stellar currents made them perfect partners for survey missions. They could sense dangerous radiation and gravitational anomalies that human instruments missed. Several dragons had bonded with human astronauts, creating teams that pushed the boundaries of known space. Together, they had discovered new worlds rich with resources and perfect for colonization. The partnership between species was opening up the galaxy, but perhaps, more importantly, the program had healed old wounds. Former enemies worked side by side in the sanctuaries. Human veterans who had lost friends to dragon attacks now cared for the creatures with genuine affection. Elvari refugees found purpose and meaning in teaching the ancient keeper traditions. Luna climbed the stairs to the observation platform, her face glowing with pride and satisfaction. She wore the silver robes of a master keeper, a rank created specifically for her by the Galactic Council. The hatchlings are doing well, she reported. Storm has been teaching them basic flight maneuvers while Zara works on discipline training. Blaze continues to be the best at bonding with new human keepers. Jake nodded, but his attention was focused on something else entirely. Luna now wore a simple golden band on her left hand, matching the one on his own finger. They had been married 6 months ago in a ceremony that brought together humans and Elvari from across the galaxy. The wedding had been a symbol of the new peace between their species. Admiral Kane had performed the ceremony, while dragons flew overhead in celebration. Commander Thane, now fully reformed from his rebel days, had given Luna away in place of her lost family. Their relationship had grown slowly from captor and prisoner to friends to partners in building the sanctuary program. Love had come naturally as they worked together toward a common goal. Now they were planning the next phase of expansion, a university dedicated to interspecies cooperation with dragon keeping as its central focus. Students would learn not just how to care for the creatures, but how to build bridges between different worlds and cultures. Dr. Richards approached with his usual excited expression. The elderly scientist had become the galaxy's leading expert on dragon biology, working closely with Luna to understand how the creatures used energy and magic. Fascinating developments, he announced breathlessly. We have confirmed that dragon scales can store and channel stellar radiation. The implications for space travel are enormous. Jake had heard similar reports before. The dragons were revolutionizing human technology in ways no one had predicted. Their scales could be harvested painlessly and used to create more efficient star drives. Their knowledge of space navigation was being incorporated into new ship designs, but the dragons were not just useful. They were changing human culture itself. Children grew up learning that former enemies could become friends, that cooperation was stronger than conquest. The lessons of the dragon sanctuaries were spreading throughout human space. A communication alert sounded from the main building. Admiral Kane appeared on the screen, looking tired but pleased. Congratulations, Captain, she said. You have been promoted to Director of Interspecies Relations. The Council wants you to oversee the expansion of the sanctuary program to other species. Jake felt a mixture of pride and concern. Other species meant the galaxy was opening up in ways he had never imagined. The success with dragons had shown that cooperation between different forms of life was possible. What other species? Luna asked, stepping into view of the screen. We have made contact with the Crystalline Collective. Kane replied, silicon-based life forms who communicate through harmonic vibrations. They are interested in establishing cultural exchange programs. There are also the deep swimmers. Kane continued. Aquatic beings from the water worlds of the Veil Nebula. They want to learn about dragon flight techniques for their young, who develop wings in their final life stage. Jake looked at Luna and saw the same excitement in her eyes that he felt. This was what they had been working toward. A galaxy where different species could learn from each other instead of fighting. The dragons sensed the excitement of their keepers. Several of the younger ones began performing aerial displays, while the older creatures added their voices to a song of celebration. Over the past 2 years, Jake had learned to understand some of the dragon language. This song spoke of new beginnings and endless possibilities of a future where the children of many worlds could grow up together. That evening, Jake and Luna walked through the sanctuary grounds hand in hand. The dragons were settling down for the night, their scales glowing softly in the darkness. Most of the human staff had gone home to their families, leaving the couple alone with their thoughts. Do you ever regret it? Luna asked quietly. Choosing to trust an enemy instead of keeping her as a prisoner. Jake considered the question seriously. Looking back, he could see how different things might have been if he had treated Luna as just another war prize. The rebel attacks might have continued. The dragons would have remained weapons instead of partners. Never, he said firmly. Trusting you was the best decision I ever made. It changed everything. For both our species. Luna leaned against him as they reached the top of the hill overlooking the entire sanctuary. Below them, dragons and humans lived together in harmony, working toward a shared future. My grandmother used to say that dragons choose their own destinies, she said softly. I think they chose this one for all of us. In the distance, the lights of New Texas colony sparkled like stars. Human and Elvari families lived side by side there, their children playing together and learning each other's languages. The next generation would grow up knowing that the galaxy was full of friends instead of enemies. A shooting star streaked across the night sky, and Jake made a wish for the future. He wished for more species to join their growing community, for new worlds to explore together, and for the bonds between different forms of life to grow stronger. The Dragon Sanctuary program had started as a way to manage defeated enemies. It had become something far greater, a blueprint for peace that could unite the entire galaxy as they walked back toward their home. Jake realized that the real war prize had not been Luna or her dragons. It had been the chance to build something better than what came before, the opportunity to choose cooperation over conquest, understanding over fear. The war was truly over, now replaced by something infinitely more valuable. The first steps toward a galactic civilization built on friendship and mutual respect. Above them, the dragons sang their night song, welcoming dreams of tomorrow while the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders waiting to be discovered by species working together. And it had all started with one human soldier choosing to trust an enemy who turned out to be the best friend he could have ever imagined.